Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and as you can see, I've already got one of my worm bins out here on the bench. I'm all set to feed. I've got the food for them all set to go too. So why don't we just get the camera in a little bit closer and go see what we're working on here. I'm curious to see what became of the little dumplings that we gave them last time. Last time we had fairly small particle matter as their food. All small chopped stuff, similar to what we've got here today. Peels of carrots, little olives off the frozen pizza that I bought the other day, other small things. Well, not everything here is small. Some of it's pretty big, but last time we had a whole bunch of small stuff, and we took these little small sheets of newspaper like you see here, and we filled them with the food. So each little package of food was enveloped into its own little enclosure. And the food was placed right down here, down the middle, right where this feeding zone indicator is showing us where we last fed. So let's see, we had one covering, top covering newspaper, and then just the overall top covering paper bag. That's what that was, paper bag. And by knowing that we're covering with only paper here, not too surprising that we've got somewhat dry material out here on the surface, but it doesn't feel that bad. Probably don't have to go very deep to get to some nice damp material. Alright. Sometimes to me it seems like the top surface is a little bit deceiving, especially in cases like this where worms tend to avoid it because of its somewhat dryness. And if you were to just remove a little bit of it, we got ourselves a little centipede, which I don't consider a welcome guest in my worm bins. To me, it seems like brushing aside some of this slightly drier stuff, it gives me a much better impression of what's really going on here. I think if we were to just sample some of the material, do like a sort of just cross-section of what this stuff in general looks like. Well, now we're seeing a lot of worms, but now it really does start to all look pretty consistent. Not a whole lot of residual bedding in this material. I mean, little scraps of some of my shredded paper here and there out on the surface, surviving only because it was a little bit dry. Out here too. Yeah, you know, at 190, let's see, was it 192 days? I took some notes here. I was going to maybe not show it just because I did make a mistake. I scratched it out and corrected it. I thought I might just read from it. But basically, these red wigglers from my compost barrel, 192-day-old bin, last fed 12 days ago. This is feeding number 15 that they're getting. And after 12 days, most of my systems have been really burning through their feedings, including all the bedding they got each time. So, wondering if they might have done the same thing. Even though their food was sort of tucked away inside little paper bundles, I wonder if it, protected that food from being approached, or did it make pretty much no difference at all? I figured I would just try to go a little bit counter to what I normally do. A lot of times I'll just go straight for the feeding area to see how they did, look for leftovers, stuff like that. Today I thought I'd head out to the outer edges of the bin just to see how things look. Mainly out of curiosity to see if my revealing of the top surface minus the dry stuff was really indicative of what the whole system in general looks like. And it seems to be a pretty good representation. It's a system that's, high concentration of castings at this point. It's all castings that all just flow very readily. But there's certainly enough moisture, You dig down a little bit and right away you're already in material that's got a good bit of moisture. And now we're starting to see some of what the last feeding consisted of. Looks like we didn't really, looks like we didn't hold back much in terms of giving them bedding, because there seems to be a whole lot of it down in here. And my idea was to give them even more today, if it makes sense to do so. So we mixed in some of my prepared bedding, and I've got some of it right here on the sidelines ready to go. I'm just starting to wonder if we might want to leave them be with what they got last time, because what they got last time was not only, 4 pieces of paper like this into which the food had been placed. I made a little capper on top of each little portion of veggies down inside of each of those little dumplings. I threw in a whole bunch of this prepared bedding too. And while it does seem like they're in it and they're busy working it, it does seem like they've also got a good bit of it left over here. I mean, maybe we could include a little something, but I'm really feeling like we've got to throttle back. Although there might not be that much harm if we try to look at it in terms of possibly just trying to increase overall real estate in the system by giving them more material to roam in. Maybe that's the better way to look at it. Maybe we will simply make a whole bunch of room into which we can continue with our plan of adding more bedding. This looks like another piece of the sort of vegetable, I think, similar to what we're going to be feeding here today. One of these end pieces of one of these soup greens. I think that inner structure is what you see after the worms nibble away what's soft. And eventually they'll nibble it all away, but what remains is what's a little bit tougher to begin with. It looks like we've got good bits of that stuff here. I don't think this is the same piece we saw before. This one has a lot of little baby worms hanging out in it. So it does look like we've got a little bit of leftover material. Most of it looks like it's been stripped clean of everything that was soft enough to be stripped clean. And then bedding, you know, good bit of bedding left over in here too. Every now and then it feels like my finger bumps into something that might be another little leftover piece of some food bit. Yep, there it was. Maybe that, my eye caught this too. It looks like it was a little piece of tomato or something. But mostly just leftover bedding. Yeah, they did a good job eating their meal. Another very similar cutting. Another soup green vegetable. The stem of it, or the stem end of it. Okay. Have we created enough room in here for these little guys to get a nice good boost to their bedding along with their feeding? I think we have. I guess I was just taking that as an opportunity to sort of blend in as much of this bedding as I could to the neighboring materials. Trying to unclump anything that was coming through as sort of a larger hunk of paper just stuck together. To me, it just seems like it's got a much greater chance at being consumed by the worms if it's surrounded by all kinds of other materials, not just one clump of one particular type of material. So let's see, I do have a new, hidden down here, we got a nice new coffee filter. So maybe we'll begin by introducing the old coffee filter as bedding down into our feeding. And maybe even just a little bit more of this stuff. Maybe we don't want to go quite as generous as we did last time. And maybe instead of 4 of these pieces of newspaper just crumbled up, maybe I'll go with only 2 this time. Not to say that we wouldn't be able to easily fit more if we wanted to, but I want to just not go too overboard. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's put in some of the food, I guess. Maybe we could put more in, because this is now unraveling into what appears to be more than I thought. It might not even be all that much. But this thing here too is going to have a kind of a cool looking leftover appearance to it, like these old pieces have pretty soon, once the worms nibble away the soft bits. I thought there were more. I thought we collected a good number of those things. Where'd they go? Yeah, doesn't matter. So now let's start incorporating the coffee. And as we usually do, bringing the coffee in is usually an excuse to bring more bedding in. And even worm chow. So let's drop in a little bit of this worm chow, as well as this coffee here, into this pile of bedding. We'll set this aside, and this will be our new feeding zone indicator. Now, all these things together, I think, are going to be something that the worms really enjoy, hopefully. And I'm just debating whether I want to put more newspaper in. I'm thinking, maybe. Maybe only after I've given myself one more handful of this stuff, so that it's a good someplace for me to put a little bit more of this stuff. And you know what? I've also got my grit. Let's not forget we can give them some of my grit. Even though the system's been fed, 14 times already. This is feeding number 15. I like to continue to add grit, even though the system probably has tons of it in it already. And you know what? We can leave this whole. It'll be the first thing that goes, I'm sure. All that moisture coming off, it's going to dampen all this paper nearby. And I think the material in general has a really nice consistency to it. It definitely does not have too much moisture. In no place in the bin anywhere did I sense anywhere near too much moisture. Everything's very fine and crumbly, but the worms are everywhere enjoying it. So I also don't feel like it's too dry, just in case it comes through that way on the video. I'm just giving you sort of first-hand experience from touching it here in my hands. It's not that bad. Perhaps this stuff right here, this little bit that I pulled out of here, out of this corner, this might have been that top material. I think it ended up over there, and that was stuff that we knew was dry because it's what came from the top. I kind of ended up here on the top again. Maybe this is a good opportunity for us just to get some of this drier stuff submerged. Give it a fair chance at being, something that the worms will spend a little bit of time working on instead of it just being continuously ignored. And let's see, we've got some stuff in there that's going to probably kick off some moisture. Those veggies, I'm not so sure. Those peels of whatever those were, and the ends, maybe a little bit of moisture will come off those. The watermelon is what I'm counting on as probably producing a good bit of moisture as it breaks down and thaws because it's frozen. But let's see, we've given them food, we've given them worm chow even, make the feeding really tempting. We give them bedding of this kind, bedding of that kind, even grit. A little bit of pulverized eggshell as grit. So I think things are looking really good in here. I think we can go right back to covering right back up with paper only again and continue that way. I was a little worried, sometimes I don't want to allow things to get too dry, but it does seem like when I've allowed just the top surface of the material to get a little bit dry, what's right beneath it is really, really nice stuff. So I think that's it for today's check-in with our now 192-day-old worm bin, worms that came from the compost barrel, and they've been doing so nice in here. I'm so glad for that. So I'm going to start cleaning stuff up and putting things away, but before I get into that, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated, and if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.